Another nutrient that has kind of gotten expensive again, nitrogen. And you say, yeah, we should know everything we need to know about this nutrient. And yet we are still learning. And maybe we're learning because of the fact that it's gotten expensive and we got to figure it out at a deeper level. Claude?
So some things we're going to talk about today is nitrogen efficiency is not what you think in today's presentation. So if you were thinking placement, you were thinking type of fertilizer, you were thinking what stabilizer I'm using, kind of machinery I'm using, it's part of it, but there's more to it than that, and it's comes down to a certain segment of how we do it and when we do it. So we're going to look at what we measure when we agronomist or a grower sits down and wants to put a nitrogen plant together. So always important to do the soil tests. For those who do soil tests, you get a good idea what's in the soil, make a decision based off that, get your application set, you go to the field. But what actually matters besides making that good recommendation? We have a variable in here that is different in every farm you go to. Depends on who's in charge of putting things down. Could be the operator. But if you have an agronomist that has 2 growers and they give them the perfect recommendation, but if they're not managed correctly, that loss may happen before they even decide to get to the field. So it's not just about making that perfect nitrogen recommendation. It's like, how do we make sure that we save that nitrogen and put in the ground? Because nitrogen is the unique one. It has a pathway that it goes through to get to available in 2 different formats. And there's changes that if we don't handle them correctly, we can put ourselves at risk of loss. And as Craig just talked about, is when it comes down to what fits the grower. What time do I do it? Do I have enough time? Do I have, what's convenient to me? When should I put it down? Oh, I got Tuesday works for me. I'm gonna go do it Tuesday. Or depends on, I'm gonna float it on because it makes more sense and it's supposed to rain, so let's go do that. So you just had this great agronomic decision that your agronomist gave you, and you may have changed that whole thing based off of some small decisions. So it's important that we look at those little things after changing it, because we talk about so many pounds of nitrogen for a bushel. Well, we can't change that. You can get better varieties that you talked about. We can do different things to increase that efficiency, but we can do small things that throw it out the window. So who controls the weather? Who's got irrigation? Yeah, he's pretty lucky. So he can control the little weather a little bit. One guy in here. We can control the exposure. It's not easy. I'm going to try to give you some thought process of how to control the exposure, and that's what we're going to focus our time on today. So you may make a decision early on when I talked about going to the field that you maybe already lost some pounds because of the decision you made. And based on some of the equipment you had, based on how you're getting there, based on time of year that you decided to fly it on, based on the form that you used and when it went on. So you maybe already lost some nitrogen right off the start. And as nitrogen goes through its pathway, what we'll cover a little bit here as we go through it, is in each pathway there's a component of loss depending on the type of nitrogen. And so we have to think of the nitrogen we're applying and where that loss is happening, and how our soil, how we apply it, how do we protect that exposure. We want to limit the amount of exposure as much as possible. So it says perfect agronomy with imperfect execution can equal poor efficiency. So let's dig deeper into understanding exposure of nitrogen and where those potential losses might be. So this is some of this stuff is my opinion based off of my learning. You may have some different opinion. But when it comes to nitrogen, when it comes to focusing on the 2 products of urea or UAN, from what I see and what I can tell from our research, your first loss is going to be your worst loss. So the biggest thing when it happens with whether you're UAN or urea, your biggest loss is that first loss, and that is the volatilization loss that we'll get into. And in volatilization, as much as you want to do things, it happens really quickly. How many people think that they have a week after they apply their nitrogen to worry about it? Good answer, because it happens very quick. So I'm going to spend my time talking about hydrolysis. And hydrolysis is just a name for any reaction that involves water that is a conversion process. And in this process with urea, what we have is a process where urea or UAN, the urea portion of UAN, which is 50% urea, will turn its way along the line, go from ammonia to ammonia. And where's the scary part? Scary part is ammonia, because we can't control that. We can do some things to maybe change that, but we can't control it. And the more ammonia we apply in a dangerous spot, the worse off we are. One of the things I'd like to talk about with those two products is that hydrolysis is a matter of fact, and it is the one component that we can change to save our urea, because we know what's going to happen based off of what we do. We know how fast it's going to happen based off of what we do. So if we put our urea in a place where we know volatilization is going to be high, that's on us. That's on us as how we operate. So we need to think, how do I stop that board? How do I stop that exposure? And there's a little fella in here. I don't know where the pointer is on here, maybe right here. I don't know if you guys can read that. Urease enzyme, it says. Who's heard of the urease enzyme? Quite a few people, so I'm not going to blow you away here. Urease enzyme is responsible for speeding up the process. It's a catalyst. So it makes the process, attacks urea, makes that conversion from urea to ammonia very quickly. So it's a key component of what we talk about. So urea sitting on top of the ground. Unfortunately, you don't have this option with UAN. The urea portion is already dissolved. But urea sitting on top of the ground with no moisture, you're good. If there's no moisture sits in your bin, there's nothing happening. You're good. Problem is, as soon as you get some water, that's when that whole process starts. The urease enzyme can only affect the urea once it's dissolved. So when it comes to UAN, the urease enzyme can attack it right away. When it comes to urea, that has to dissolve with the water process, and then the urease enzyme will go after it. So the most dangerous condition is just enough rain. So if we know we need moisture, and if moisture makes that process happen quickly, if we have just enough moisture to make the process happen quickly, but not to move that nitrogen in a safe spot, it's the biggest concern we have. So if you think that I'm going to go put some urea down, it goes to rain at some point. Good idea, not bad. Logically, it sounds great. But if we go put that urea on and we get 5 millimeters, we're going to have made our volatilization way worse than what we thought we were going to do. So if you know what's going to rain or you think it's going to rain, make sure you know what's going to rain. Nice thing, if you do get a nice big rain, your volatilization is taken care of. For the most part. Soil pH. We talked about soil pH today. There's a lot of different agronomy that comes into nitrogen efficiencies. Soil pH, when it comes to our first loss, is a really big important thing. Sometimes you go to a crowd and they don't always know their pH, but who has real low pH in here? Like say 6 and less. Yeah, Mike, you got some. So the good news to those folks is that you're in a better position when it comes to volatilization off the top. Because excess hydrogen helps that process along. So as we got a nice cool graph that was done, it was some research that was done some time ago, but basically looking at 5.5 to 7.5 pHs. Not really taking into account the different type of other texture and stuff, but pH is very important when it comes to volatilization. So it's a good target. So basically from 0 days all the way to 10 days. Volatilization on the 5.5 after 10 days is only 10%. In where we call it was exposed to high volatilization. 7.5 soil after 10 days was 44%. So basically, when I'm thinking of exposure, I got low soil when it comes, maybe not nice for some other chemistry, but for when it comes to nitrogen volatilization, I got low pH, great. I got high pH, I have to think differently. I got to be more protected. Here's another cool thing when it comes to concentration and volatilization. So what you're seeing in front of you here is the easiest way to explain this is that if I put my nitrogen on the surface, even with low pH, I still don't have that same protection as if my nitrogen's in the ground with low pH. But if I have low pH and I put my nitrogen close to the surface, I still may get some really big losses, even in a 5.5 pH. And so what's happening there? Why am I seeing at 1 inch depth such high losses early? But as soon as I go to 2 to 3, my losses disappear. It's really cool. This is really cool stuff when I look at it. So essentially what's happening is that once you start putting the nitrogen in the ground, and usually you're putting it in you're putting it in a band. Yeah, thank you. And so what happens there is when you put it in a band, the reason that you see such excess loss of volatilization is that there's only so much hydrogen from that band to the surface that can control that volatilization. But when I went and started putting down deeper, all of a sudden I had more protection. I had all that excess hydrogen to change that. So even though I may have low pH soil, I still gotta be conscious where I'm putting my product, because I could run into some issues. I got a great idea. I'm just gonna go put some nitrogen on the ground. I'm gonna go cover it real quick. Let's go put some arrows on it, and that'll be good. Should be good. Who's heard that? I've heard that too many times. Yeah. If you're doing a fantastic job of incorporating, it's a great idea. If you're not doing a great job of incorporating, you may have just hastened the whole volatilization process. Because what do we need to make that process happen? We talked about moisture. So if I go from putting the stuff on top and putting it into the soil, now I have moisture. That process can speed up really quickly. And if we just learned a slide ago, if I didn't do a really good job of incorporating that down deep, even if I have low pH, it may not be in a tight band, but if I don't get it that inch or more down, I'm at dangerous risk of exposure. So basically, if someone tells you they're going to go till their nitrogen after, they better do a good job. Do a real good job. It's a good idea, but you got to do a good job. Who thinks they ban their nitrogen, they're good? Kind of talked a little bit about that already. Looks like everybody's kind of caught up. So this is where rate, pH, texture, you start getting a lot more agronomy and how to just reduce my exposure. So one of the things that we worry about if I have that high calcareous soil, my depth of my band is a lot more concerning than my low pH soil. So make sure that if you are planning to, based on your soil type, make sure you reduce that exposure as much as possible based on your soil type. Here's kind of a cool little look. It's, every soil is a little different, but here's just a quick look. On the surface, extreme rest, 50%. 1 inch, up 25%. 2 inches, 10%. Now I get it down to the safe zone, 5%. And this is, we're talking volatilization. We're not talking denitrification losses. Here's another little, if you want to do like a quick calculation for cost of return. Here's kind of a neat concept. If I get 10% loss and I only get 15% reduction, I'm getting not getting my money back. If I'm getting 25% loss and 70% reduction with whatever I'm using to stop that loss, I get for every dollar I get $2.60 back. So here's just some thought processes. How much am I expected of my loss based off my soil, how deep I am? And there's a lot more. Craig's actually given a really good talk on shallow banding and how to make the best sense to make sure that you reduce your loss. Because banding is probably the #1 use for nitrogen for UAN and urea. Something we looked at gotta be 13, 12 years ago, we got into the nitrogen management process. And we learned a lot of stuff over the years. Did a lot of great work, University of BC, University of Winnipeg, University of Manitoba. But as we were going through the process, one of the things that we said is, how do we make this more affordable for the grower? So we said, because that's typically when we talk to a grower, it was the cost to apply to go down that path. So I'll give up some nitrogen because it maybe costs, right? Which I can't argue with that. So we looked at different rates to see what the value of different rates, and we thought, when we originally did it, we thought we had created a scenario where we would see an excess drop off on volatilization based off of chemistry. Unfortunately, we didn't get there. So with the products that we had, which we hold ourselves to good quality products that we make, actually make them in Saskatoon. But we basically had untreated chick, which you were seeing, and this is a banded. We did banded and we did some broadcast, all different scenarios, but similar type of concept is that when we were at 1.2 liters of a lower NBPT product, we still thought fairly good protection. And I'd say across the board, the low-end product still provided us 70% or more protection on volatilization, whereas the high quality products were getting us in that 94% protection. So will you see some drop off? You might see a little bit. We didn't get to a point where we saw the cliff fall off. So, and the whole goal of these products is that, we talked about that ureas guy, is the whole goal of that NBPT molecule is to go, once it gets into solution, the NBPT molecule is there, when that ureas comes along, it'll block the active site of that ureas. So it blocks it so it can't come get the nitrogen and make that conversion happen really quick. And so we thought we'd see a point where we just didn't have enough of it, and the ureas would go past that. The other thing that we kind of came along, and we've actually further looked into it, was that where you have to have the right mindset of protection for volatilization and denitrification. And it was kind of cool because we came up with this as we did our research. And we saw that if you had too much protection against denitrification, you would influence your volatilization. Did I say that right? Did that come across right? So I'm going to show you with some. I'm going to show you. So what this is all about is that, and we saw this more so in a banded process, but we do see it on broadcast too, is the chemistries. There's a few different chemistry. We have a chemistry called, in short form, DMPP to stop the nitrification process from happening. But basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep your nitrogen in the ammonium form as long as you can, because you're concerned about it converting to nitrate. Because you may have conditions that nitrate is one of your main losses. So depending what kind of soil you have, your agronomist will know that might be your main loss. Maybe it's volatilization depending on your soil. So what we ran into is that most of the chemistries are designed to basically keep the biology at bay. So urease is an enzyme that takes the volatilization process. Nitrification process occurs with biology. And so the chemistry involved is what we would consider biostatic. So biostatic doesn't kill the chemistry, just keeps it kind of away so that process can't happen and your nitrogen can stay in where you want it to. NH4 can stay attached. What we saw with the chemistry and we saw a little bit in our own data, we didn't get to really high levels. When we use products with really high levels to stop that process from converting, we saw increased volatilization. So we didn't see it once, we kept seeing it repetitively. And so looking into the science of why that happens, so if you have high pH soil, or if you get in a tight band where you create a really high pH issue, what happens is you leave your nitrogen, and you can't have that conversion process from happening. You leave your nitrogen in ammonium. And when it's in ammonium, it actually has no problem switching back to ammonia. It'll try to stay to ammonium, and if it connects to the soil, you're fantastic. But if you have too much, it's still free. It doesn't have a place to find itself. It's still free. And so if it's too close to a place where it might be volatilized, it's not down based on your soil far enough down, it will stay as the NH4, go back to NH3, you'll get more loss. So in this case, versus the check, sandy soil worked pretty good. As you went to the competitor product here, it actually had greater volatilization than what the check was. But one thing it was amazing at, it was amazing at holding the nitrogen as ammonia. It was amazing at it. But the losses outcompeted the advantage. Hopefully that made sense, because that's the cruel information that picking the right products is important. Knowing your soil is really important. Knowing your weather is really important. Knowing your area is really important, and timing. Nitrous oxide. We hear a lot about this as it's an important greenhouse gas. So it gets a lot of attention. It's got some social political factors which have, and I heard there's actually new funds out that are available for efficiencies on their farm. So if you haven't heard about that, I believe the government now has access to more funds, whole new 3-year program. So that's encouraging. So doing the right things on your farm to make sure that you can, from split applications to treatments to changing over your equipment, there's a lot of different cool things of that program that you can do on your farm and get some dollars back. So what about nitrous oxide? So nitrous oxide occurs mostly through the nitrification process from when it changes from ammonium all the way to nitrate. The other portion that happens when you have denitrification. So the components that the government's looking for is they're looking for chemistries that slow that froth process down. So we have our DMPP. We saw with the higher level of DMPP, we saw anywhere from 29 on banded and 50% on broadcast. And lighter rate of DMPP, we saw 18 and 23. So the more chemistry you put down to stop that process, the more nitrous oxide we stop from getting exposed. So the chemistry works. It makes sense. The government's got the right mindset to reduce nitrous oxide. They're doing what they need to do to get people encouraged to stop the nitrous oxide from being released. I'm a grower. I want to obviously have a healthy world. I want to take care of it, but I also got to worry about my pocketbook. So what's the true importance to me about nitrous oxide when it comes to economics? Nitrous oxide in a day this is just one of the tests that we did, 2 different types of soils, broadcast banded. But typically your total nitrogen, in this case it was 90 pounds, 92 pounds of total nitrogen. Well, 3 to 5% is what you lose to nitrous oxide. And that's kind of very similar. So it's not a huge portion of your loss. Your first loss is going to be the volatilization loss. So still important. You can still stop it. And the nice thing about the government programming is they'll help you with the first loss at the same time, which is kind of cool. So let's try to get things put together here. So hopefully learn some new stuff. Match your application. Understand your exposure. Understand where you might have your most losses. Use your agronomist or your own advice about the nitrogen you want to apply to get the best efficiencies, because the greatest programs can be lost, as we learned before you even get to the field. Shorten your exposure, don't mask it. Didn't get a chance to talk about all this stuff, but all this stuff's really important. pH, moisture, organic matter, thatch cover. We get a little thing about the thatch cover. One thing I was going to mention when it comes to harrowing or putting your nitrogen in. If most of your nitrogen is caught up in your trash, I'd still rather you see you shake it off, because urease is kind of everywhere. You can't stop the urease enzyme. It's all over. It's on our skin. It's all over the place. But it's quite concentrated when it comes to trash, organic matter. So if you have a whole bunch caught up in your trash, maybe that's a good time to go take it onto the ground, but still may not be worth your return on investment. So product choice, efficiency is a system outcome. Learn what you're doing, learn how you're doing it. Efficiency is not in a jug. You still got to know how you do. You can't just put something on your urea and go, I'm good to go. I don't care what I do. I'm safe. That's not the case. Make sure you understand everything about your product and your equipment, the timing. Put it all together. Hundreds of products out there. Craig mentioned prices are up. Obviously, every pound that you lose is a little bit more expensive. There's no more of that. I'll just put more on when it gets expensive. I don't care what my loss is. I'll just throw some more on. It's not a practice we should probably do anyways, because as we know that will just increase your nitrous oxide levels. Expensive nitrogen. You may not always see all the losses from your bank account, but it's happening. So make sure you reduce that exposure. So try to do more early. Figure out where and when and how I need to do things. Make sure you limit the exposure. That is, at the end of the day, is what we need to do. Don't let our nitrogen be exposed to loss, because the pathway is unstoppable. You can slow it down, you can tweak it, but it will happen. It's impossible to negotiate with nitrogen losses with a good agronomist. With a good agronomist, you never have to. So find somebody who understands all this stuff, because it's a lot of stuff. It might have been 30-minute presentation, maybe 40, but 30? Perfect. But it's not that easy. There's a lot that goes into it. A little plug for our TSN coated urea. It is what we like about this product is one of the challenges that we had with treated nitrogen is obviously logistics. Urea is sticky, it can't look, the retail can't do it, a number of different things out there. TSN is free coated, better logistics, it's ready to roll. And to my mindset, based off all the stuff we learned, we have the right chemistry in that. And I'm happy that we went where we went based off the stuff that we continue to learn about other products in the marketplace. Hopefully everybody's got a guide. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time. Hopefully you learned something new.